School board squirms and frets as mom reads graphic account of gay sex between an adult and a child out loud from books available to students as young as 11. Well, get used to it, you school board prudes. They're queer, they're here, and now they're in your ear. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is the rather disgusted Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today's show is sponsored by Mike Lindell and our friends at MyPillow. You can save up to 66% at MyPillow.com when you use our specific access code. That's Dr. Duke, D-R-D-U-K-E. Support us by supporting MyPillow. Okay, today we start in Virginia, where a mom recently made a school board squirm reading passages after passages after passages of books found in the school library for high school kids describing graphic sex acts, including sex acts between adults and children.
Of course, this is happening at Fairfax. Fairfax, of all places in the whole wide world, is pretty much at this point the epicenter of school board mishandlings and just awful things happening. And it's good that at least the parents are bringing it forth to them, because apparently the school board either appears to know nothing about it or they're just shamelessly sitting there. And I think it's the latter.
Yes, it is.
But we do have one mother who did stand up to the school board, and we're just going to let her tell us. And before we do, happening.
Even though we've bleeped out the worst of the words, you just might want to make sure that you don't have any kids in the room as you hear this.
After seeing a September 9th school board meeting in Texas on pornography in the schools, I decided to check the titles at my child's school, Fairfax High School. The books were available, and we checked them out. Both of these books include pedophilia, sex between men and boys. Both books describe different acts. One book describes a 4th grade boy performing oral sex on an adult male. The other book has detailed illustrations of a man having sex with a boy. The illustrations include fellatio, sex toys, masturbation, and violent nudity. Pedophilia here. From the author, Maya Kobabe, quote, "I can't wait to have your in my mouth. I am going to give you the of your life, and then I want you inside me," end quote. From the author, Jonathan Evison, "What if I told you I touched another guy's What if I told you I sucked it? I was 10 years old, but it's true. I sucked Doug Goebel's the real estate guy, and he sucked mine too." This is not an oversight at Fairfax High School.
May I please make a point of, there are children in the audience here.
Do not interrupt my time. Do not interrupt my time.
I would like to remind everybody.
I will stand here until my time is restored and my time is finished. These books are in stock and available in the libraries of Robinson,
for high school
Langley,
students, ma'am.
and Annandale High School. Pornography is offensive to
Madam
all
Clerk.
people. It is offensive to common decency. It is the reason why the MPAA
Our next speaker is...
You know, and the thing that is really troublesome is that the school board defends this because it's in high school classes. That makes it okay. And again, the last time I checked, sex between adults and children was illegal. Not a single word about that from the school board. It is illegal for an adult male to have sex and to perform sex on a child. And yet this school board, who should be immediately removed, refuses to criticize that book, and further actually argued to that mother, it's high school which makes a difference.
Well, the simple fact that there are 12 members of that school board, and all of them are female, with the exception of one. There he is, Carl Fritsch, who has spent much time not being a school board member because he's too busy being an activist, says it's not every week the school board receives 2 exorcisms during public comment. To be clear, nothing will disrupt our board's commitment to LGBTQIA+ students, families, and staff. Nothing. Period.
And what does pedophilia have to do with that? Oh, yeah, that's right. The dirty secret that everybody knows is the LGTB blah, blah, blah supports children having sex with adults. That's part of what their platform is. That's the dirty little secret. And that makes them what do we call it? Let's just say, I don't know, a organization that needs a serious checkup with the law. If you're going to push this kind of stuff, if you're going to have school board members pushing that kind of stuff in your behalf, then we have laws, even all across the country and even in Virginia, these are illegal things. Can you imagine if, flip this for a second, if I realize that there are individuals who would still approve of this, probably many on that board in Virginia. But can you imagine if you had a situation where an adult man was doing that to a 10-year-old girl? Or vice versa. I seriously think that the board would be much more worried about the illegality of that. But because it's men on men sex, somehow the homosexual community has convinced people that this is different. Just like boys molested by female teachers, the whole situation gets punished a lot less than adult male teachers who molest female children. There's a double standard here. It's disgusting, and something has to be done. Now, it must be also said that because of the pressure, national pressure brought to bear on this Virginia school, Fairfax, because of, among other things, pedophilia, they have temporarily removed the books from the library, and they have appointed a library committee to determine whether or not the book is actually worth keeping in the library.
Well, and I mean, they're doing their due diligence because they are creating two committees. The Fairfax County Public Schools will create two committees consisting of staff members, students, and parents, which the district's library services coordinator will lead. And they're going to examine the, quote, suitability of both texts for inclusion in high school libraries.
Wait,
unquote. Yeah.
So the librarian who brought those books into the school, or at least allowed it to happen, is going to be chairing one of these committees?
Well, overseeing.
Well, she's overseeing these committees, right?
I'm not sure who it is.
Yes.
We don't know. But what's important to note, we didn't get to see the rest of what happened, but as predicted, the school board had to flee a bit. So you saw LinkedIn had her mic cut off, but then she spoke very loudly, reading the name of a law that she said the school board was violating, because school boards tend to, now in 2021, violate a lot of laws because they don't care about laws and they don't know what their actual duties are to the public, so they just do what they want. It takes you, mom and dad, to know the laws and tell them. So anyway, LinkedIn says it shall be unlawful for any person knowingly to circulate any notice or advertisement of any obscene item. Okay, and then all of the members, with the exception of our friend Carl Fritsch, plus Laura Jane Cohen, whose child is transgender and who frequently redirects educational issues to gay issues. We've seen that in the past. We've talked about her. And another one, Abrar Omish, who, by the way, was opposed to a resolution that honored the victims of 9/11. So you can kind of get a little bit more information about who these people are. They all stayed while everyone else fled the stage as the audience chanted, "Go to jail." So that's where we're at. Now, before we move on, just a very quick reminder that the best way to access our content is to download our Freedom Project Media app. Simply search for Freedom Project in your app store, download, and then make sure you allow for notifications. And if you like listening to the audio podcast, we are available on Apple, Google, SoundCloud, and pretty much everywhere else. And we're also available here every day to speak to you about school boards, because we're going to continue with that in the next story, because we have another mom. This time we're in Texas, not Virginia, but we're in Texas, where a mother decided that she had enough of seeing what was in her young student, this time junior high level, what was in their libraries and classrooms. And so this is happening at the Lake Travis Independent School District in Austin, Texas, which might as well be in Virginia at this point. And her mic was also cut off, because that's what we do. We just cut off the microphones of the parents who actually care.
And again, before you take a look at this video, we recommend strongly, even though we've blanked out the words, we really strongly advise you to have no kids in the room when you hear this.
For the boys, or the idea of a Mexican is a Mexican is a Mexican. Take her out back, we boys figured, then hand on the Put it in her coin box, put it in her cornhole, grab a hold of that braid, rub that calico. You can find that on page 39 of the book called Out of Darkness, which you can find at Hudson Bend Middle School and Bee Cave Middle School. It means to have anal sex. I do not want my children to learn about anal sex in middle school. I have never had anal sex. I don't want to have anal sex. I don't want my kids having anal sex. I want you to start focusing on education and not public health.
Stone, you're on.
Yep, that's how they do it. So this book, Out of Darkness, it's about a love affair between a black boy and a Mexican-American girl amid a 1937 explosion in East Texas that killed nearly 300 school children and teachers. Why that book was written in the first place, I don't know. But as you saw, the mom, Carabelle, decided that she needed to alert the school board of what was happening, and it initially started with an anonymous, at least unidentified caller who said that this book was in the library and that it could be checked out from both Hudson Bend and Bee Cave middle schools. Now, we were told, according to a spokesperson, that the book was removed, as they always are, and then they're going to hope, I'm sure, that the story goes away and then it quietly gets put back on the shelf. It'd be interesting to take a look at all of these instances of where the school has decided, we're going to pull it for review, and then see if the book actually gets put back on.
Well, and let's not kid ourselves. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of books like this waiting to take its place that are also on the shelves. It's funny, these libraries, these library committees and these school boards, they didn't have public hearings when they actually stripped the public school libraries of the classics, right? I remember during the Common Core debacle early on we're talking about 2009, 10, 11, so all sort of news reports about public school libraries dumping books, throwing them away, recycling them, giving them away. We're talking about the great classics. We're talking about Homer and Dickens and Shakespeare and Bronte, all those books that children have read for 100 years, that have had morality, that had cohesive presentations about Western culture, books that challenge them on the readerly level, that introduced their eyes to a wide range of subjects and issues. All those books were trashed in favor of all these new wave, radically sexualized books written by people nobody's ever heard of, being paid for by people like Planned Parenthood and LGBTQ alliances, with one purpose: to make sure your kids read only radical, progressive, indoctrinating issues, especially when it comes to sexuality.
Well, by the district's own policy, you would think that they would have Homer in the library, but we know probably not. What they also said about this specific instance is that the district shall not remove materials from a library for the purpose of denying students access to ideas with which the district disagrees. A district may remove materials because they are pervasively vulgar or based solely upon the educational suitability of the books in question. Yeah, I'm guessing Homer's gone, and yet they have this in there.
Since they're
even
not
though
allowed,
it's not what it's supposed.
They're not allowed to remove books for reasons of dislike. I wonder if there's how many Bibles are in the library. I wonder how much they're able to read that stuff. I mean, you think it all? No. Pedophilia and anal intercourse are perfectly acceptable to school boards and to teachers, but not anything that would be remotely linked to one of the great classics of Western culture, and certainly nothing in the Bible.
Now, if we listen to Jonathan Friedman, who is with PEN America, a nonprofit organization defending diversity, inclusion, and free expression in literature, he says contending views about what students should learn in school are at a boiling point, with the debates over the content of books becoming more heated. As he says, I think to pretend books that deal explicitly with sex or sexual assault are in some way a threat to young people are doing them a disservice. This is about having access for young people to a wide variety of literature that people from different backgrounds are reflected in. You have a small contingent in many cases of parents who decide that they disagree and that they must know better than those who are in the classroom.
This is not about access. You are not teaching them anything but these kind of books. As we've said before, show us an instance where you're teaching them a classic book that has nothing to do with any of this. You are giving them the same tendentious political readings, the highly sexualized readings, because you're pushing and advocating for lifestyle changes. You are not showing sex in most instances, and even in a healthy format. Many of these books deal with rape and incest incest and sodomy and pedophilia. These are not just perspectives. They are not just alternative ways to having sex. They are, in many respects, questionable in terms of health, particularly things like sodomy. They are illegal, especially with regards to pedophilia. And oftentimes the children in these books are having sex underage, if not having sex with adults. This is outrageous that you're pretending this is just another form of access. That would be like showing kids hardcore pornography in the classroom and saying, hey, kids have to learn about porn somewhere. We have a moral obligation to expose kids to gangbang porn or whatever it is. It's outrageous.
We're going to switch it up just a bit. Now we're going to stay obviously in school, but we're going to go all the way out to Washington State, where we have Jason Rance, who we've been basically saying high praises of for months and months, because Jason Rance does radio show out there in the Seattle area. He's reporting on what's actually happening in schools, and then we can relay that information to you. And so what we're finding out that now, if your child is in a school out there, you can't eat without having your mask on, which means you can't eat at all. But it's happening at the Tacoma Geiger Montessori School, where they demanded that elementary students, I'll say it one more time, elementary students must chew and swallow their lunch with their mask on while they are in the cafeteria. Wow. The district actually backed the policy by citing guidance that basically does not even exist. Way to go, school. And it actually says that masks shouldn't be worn while eating lunch. Details, right? We're not following any of that. The principal, Neil O'Brien, emailed parents 4 days after the first day of school with an update on COVID policies there at Geiger. He said students must wear their masks during lunch in the cafeteria, and despite social distancing and outstanding ventilation, they must put the mask back up to chew and swallow their food, as the email stated. Yes. Period. Children should wear masks during lunch. They can lower it to take a bite or a drink and raise it to chew, swallow, or talk. Our cafeteria has a fantastic airflow system, and children are spaced apart, and when over 100 of them are in one large room, the cafeteria and gym combined, we need to treat lunchtime as a dangerous time for all. Children need to continue to wear their masks during lunch.
So now lunch is dangerous, but exposing children to pedophilia and anal sex and all the rest of that, rape, that's access, right? When we let kids access their bologna sandwich at lunch, that's danger. But when we allow them to access hardcore queer porn, well, that's just access, right? Is this what we're supposed to believe from our public schools now? Or our Montessori schools now?
You picked bologna.
My bologna has a first name. It's O-S-C-A-R.
I never
My
had.
bologna has a second name. M-A-Y-E-R. I love to eat it every day. That is why I wish to say we need to just burn these schools down. I can think of no other reason. Wait, hold on. Did I just incite violence?
Yes, you did.
We need to metaphorically, with words and lawsuits, burn these schools to the ever-loving ground, metaphorically.
Metaphorically. No, I always had hot lunch, so I never had bologna sandwiches.
Hot lunch. Is it like hot pants? What's a hot lunch?
The lunch at school.
Oh, warm, you mean? Like cooked?
Yeah, hot lunch.
As opposed to
hot lunch. Everyone.
Is that like
Write
tater?
In the comments. Was that not called hot lunch? Hot lunch.
The tater tots and all that stuff that you used to get.
We had tater tots. Yes.
Did you have bologna?
We did not have bologna. That would be a cold lunch that you would have packed. But I never got name brand stuff, so I did not have the OSCAR.
Little bologna.
Back to the story.
Little bologna with a little plastic cheese that you have to unwrap from the little plastic, and then a little bit of really boring yellow mustard. Warm room temperature after sitting.
This explains everything about his childhood versus my childhood.
Sitting at room temperature.
How he is today versus how I am today.
And when you finally ate it at lunch, it was already room temperature. Anyway, go ahead.
Poor, sad story for you. Now back to the story. One parent actually told the principal that the rule is insane and demanded it be reconsidered, and the principal was not returning that father's email at all. The district did finally admit the school was a little overzealous in the rule. But we have Shale Hobbs, who's Tacoma Public Schools Administrator of Health Services, the titles that these people get at these big school districts, they make no sense. The Administrator of Health Services actually backs the rule, saying that...
You don't say.
Yeah, I know. Children are encouraged to put their mask back on when not eating or drinking, as outlined in the CDC resource document outlining the K-12 schools guidance. And she even cited page 6 was the source. And guess what? Take a look at page 6. And nope, it's not there. Nothing there. It doesn't address masks while chewing and swallowing. And page 6 actually only suggests you provide social distancing for all students when masks cannot be worn, such as when eating lunch. So, whoops.
It's time for some real education. We're going to ignore and at least try to get away from all of this radical sexuality stuff we've been looking at in this show, all the bleeped out nastiness. And we're going to look at the great novelist Fyodor Dostoevsky. Born in 1821, died in 1888. He was the absolute hammer of Marxism. He understood what Marx had done earlier in the decade, in the century, and he was all over exposing Marxism for the garbage that it was. And one of the things that Dostoevsky does in his novels, he uses a lot of anecdotes and short fairy tales and exempla to prove to people what he means, how he's trying to get his message across. There's a great story here about the love of God that Dostoevsky relates through an old wives' tale. It goes something like this. Once upon a time, there was a woman, and she was as wicked could be, and she died. And not one good deed was left behind her. The devils took her and threw her into the lake of fire, and her guardian angel stood thinking, "What good deed of hers could I remember to tell God?" Then the angel remembered and said to God, Once she pulled up an onion and gave it to a beggar woman. And God answered, "Take now that same onion, hold it out to her in the lake. Let her take hold of it and pull. And if you pull her out of the lake on the basis of that onion, she can go to paradise." The angel ran to the woman and held out the onion to her. "Here, woman," he said, "take hold of it and I'll pull." And the angel began pulling carefully and had almost pulled her all the way out when the other sinners in the lake saw her being pulled out, and all began holding on to her so as to be pulled out with her. But the woman was wicked as wicked could be, and she began to kick them with her feet. "It's me who's getting pulled out, not you. It's my onion, not yours." No sooner did she say it than the onion broke, and the woman fell back into the lake and is burning there to this day. And the angel wept and went away. And I ask my university kids all the time when we get to this passage, what's the ultimate significance of this? And they almost never get it. It's a very deep point, right? They talk about forgiveness and they talk about acts of mercy. They talk about retribution and they talk about retribution and redemption, but they never really do quite get one of the main points of the story. That what Dostoevsky is suggesting is that if that was perhaps the only good deed ever done, that this woman ever did in her life, that anybody in the world, and in the history of the world had ever done, was one time to give an onion to a beggar. If that was the only good deed that humanity had on its side of the chart, maybe because of the mercy and grace of God, that onion would have been enough to pull everyone out of the lake, assuming the sinners were able to not be so selfish. It's a very profound observation in one of the world's great books.
Okay, those are the stories for today. If you have a question for us, please feel free to drop it into the mailbag by emailing askduke@fpeusa.org.
And that's going to do it for this show. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. Until next time, das Vidania, my friends.